But he made school for me a place not to go be tortured anymore. This was a place that seemed welcoming. It was like home. And I remember he was one of the first who ever took notice of the fact that I could draw. I have dyslexia, dysnumeria, dysgraphia, and failure of sensory integration. And it's interesting, when one side of the brain shuts down, what we have now realized in research is the other brain cranks into hyperdrive. So I could draw light years ahead of my age group. He was the only one who noticed, aside from my family. And he would stand behind me and say, "Oh, Patricia, my, look what you can do." I remember one day, though, he asked me to stay after class to help wash blackboards. And I loved Mr. Felker, and you better believe I wanted to be with him. But apparently, he noticed something else about me, the most horrifying secret of my life. So I came after school with my little bucket and my little sponge. And he turned on My Fair Lady, I'll never forget it. And I started washing the blackboards with great big watery arcs. And then he came up behind me and he said, "Patricia, I want you to make a 3. Now I want you to make the letter E. Give me an M. Show me a W." And I remember realizing, oh dear God, he just found out. Now he knows how dumb I am. And I remember I dropped the bucket and the sponge and tried to run, and he came up behind me, put his hand in the center of my back. It's interesting, even now, when I'm up against something I think I can't face, I feel his hand, it's still there. And I can hear his voice in my ear very lightly saying, "Of course you can. There's nothing you can't do." And he dropped to one knee next to me and he said, "Oh, Patricia, Patricia, you've been suffering, haven't you?" And I cried, and he said, "You're having great difficulty reading." And then I cried even more and said, "Mr. Felker, I'm stupid and I'm dumb. Now you know." He said, "You know, if you fooled us all the way to your 14th year, a dumb person can't do that." He said, "Now, I don't know what's wrong with you. I'm not an expert, but you have something that has a name. There's other people like you, and I don't want you to worry. I'm going to get a friend. She's a reading specialist, and I'm going to have her come work with you." Out of his own pocket, he paid for her. Her name was Miss Plessy. She worked with me 4 nights a week. I can't tell you what the aha moment was. We did balance boards, colored acetates. I think the thing that was the most helpful for me to learn to read is George Felker put me in front of the works of M.C. Escher. Now, M.C. Escher is the master of tessellation, but he also, in his paintings, morphs and live in positive space. It was through that I realized this is how I identify words. I'm not looking at the words, I'm looking at the pattern that's around them. And this was the aha moment. And I remember the day that I could look at text, get a mental image, open my mouth, and the same thing came out of my mouth that was on that page. Not only that, can you imagine the glory of understanding for the first time in my life what it said? Paper talks. So I read a paragraph and then an entire page, and I remember the day I finally read a page. I ran all the way home, all the way home. By then, all of those wonderful ancestors of mine had since passed away. But I ran into my mother's house and got up on the kitchen counter and grabbed a jar of honey out of her kitchen cupboard, ran to her bookshelf and grabbed a book and poured honey all over that book and tasted and tasted and tasted while I stood there and cried because I was saved. George Felker believed in movement, he believed in music, he believed in art, and he believed in very unorthodox learning. Today, I walked into a place where all of the faculty believes this. where all of these children have an opportunity to climb onto a thunderbolt and streak into the heavens. I never got a chance to thank George Felker. It's interesting, when teachers saves our lives, sometimes we don't get back. And it's in a way their fault, because all educators, you see, balance children on the threshold and then they shove them from the back and they say, now you fly. I gave you the wings. Feel the wind under your wings and you keep going. Don't turn back. Keep your eye on the prize. And very rarely do we make that turn and come back. I did get to see George Felker 30 years later at an event not unlike this one, a room about this size. It was a huge wedding. My table was right here. There was the entrance. And I remember looking across the dance floor, and in came this incredible, wonderful, handsome thing, and he was in his 70s. He was still wearing bright colors, and he was regal and beautiful. And I remember I ran to him, and I grabbed him by the lapels, and I said, oh, Mr. Felker, is that you? He says, yes, I'm Mr. Felker. I said, I know you don't remember me, but Mr. Felker, you changed my life. You saved my life. Can we talk? So we came over to the table, talked for probably a couple of hours. And we laughed, and we cried, and we laughed, and we cried. Finally, he leaned into me, and he said, well, Patricia, what do you do for a living? I said, Mr. Felker, I make books for children. None of them would be in existence if you hadn't walked in that door that day. My 2 children would have never been born, and I wouldn't be sitting here. You have no idea what I was contemplating that day. He saved everything. And I cannot tell you how impressed I am by the lab school, by darling Sally. I am so sorry I'm not going to get a chance to see her. I'm vowing one of these days I'll make my way back to D.C. and I'll call her and I'll take her out to lunch, by golly. What a visionary this woman is. And you parents, I believe the philosophy of this school could save lives all over our nation. I think what is so tragic is public schools don't adopt exactly the method of learning that this school does. But what I adored when I walked from room to room was to see the hope in your children's eyes, because the eyes glaze over when you've been robbed of that. And here at this school, I am telling you, your children soar. The teachers care for them. You can feel the love in the room. You can feel their pride. And these sweet babies, please, moms and dads, don't worry about them. Boy, are they going to land on their feet. They are going to have life in its abundance. And you patrons and you board members, I personally thank you for taking the time to care about these individuals and support them with your time, your effort, your financial support. This is so vital. I am going to carry this. We'll never forget this place. And I thank you so much for this award, and I thank you for honoring all of these wonderful people up here. It's been wonderful to get to know all of them, and they are stellar. Every one of them contributes in such a magnificent way. So please accept my thanks, and I also want you to know that I think all of you are heroes, every one of you. Very heroic, incredible human beings. And your children are going to rule the world soon. Thank you. Thank you.